Welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast. Today, we are joined by Ken Abrahams. Welcome.
Thank you. The last name is
Absolutely.
actually pronounced Abrams. I know it's
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's spelled like Abrahams, but it is pronounced Abrams.
Well, it sounds cooler pronunciation-wise, so I butchered it. My apologies.
Not a problem.
Well, I brought you on the show because you have now spent over 35 years in building and running your own company, where you've steered it through lots of change with the ups and downs, COVID-19, and you're still here. I want to start off with, where did this all start for you personally with your business journey?
So I actually got started when I was in college. I was on the program board or the program council when I was in school, and I actually found that I really enjoyed providing events and experiences for people. And so I went to college with the thought of becoming an attorney and realized about halfway through my college career that every jerk that I went to school with was going to law school. And I'm thinking to myself, I really don't want to be associated with these people. And so I really love the whole entertainment piece. And I wanted to get into concerts. And so when I first started, I got involved with an agency that did live music, and I realized I didn't love that either. And a friend of mine was working for a company that was in a very new field, which was novelty and variety entertainment, which is now a huge part of, especially on college campuses, the entertainment that they provide their students. So that was really how I got my start. Was I started in college and just kind of kept going.
You had no real background, it sounds like, in business because your major wasn't actually in the space, right?
No, the school I went to, we used to joke all the time that what the education provided us was we were really good at small talk at cocktail parties because the school did not teach really anything of particular use. It was a liberal arts college, and what they wanted you to do is to have all kinds of experiences in different academic disciplines. What I realized about 20 years after I graduated was what they did was they really taught us how to look at things and think analytically and to be able to kind of form our own opinions. So no, I took one macroeconomics class, and then started to take microeconomics and realized that I was really bad at economics. So I have no formal business training. I never went back to get an MBA. Everything I've learned, I've kind of learned by the seat of my pants.
Which you probably don't need that though, right? Because a lot of the classes are very theory-based, like abstract, which I think is helpful sometimes, but you're actually doing hard learned lessons at being at the trenches here, it sounds like, for your company.
Yeah, and making a lot of mistakes along the way. So perhaps a business education might have helped me avoid some of those pitfalls. But I'm kind of pig-headed, so probably not. I probably would have ended up making those same mistakes.
So you went from college to your own company? Is that the jump there?
No, I started working for another company that did what was called non-mainstream contemporary music, which is things that were happening at the time, but not the stuff most people were listening to. A lot of the acts, if you've ever looked at the Grammys, and they almost never show them on the live show, would be considered in the heritage and traditional acts. So they were things like bluegrass bands and blues acts and reggae and Zydeco and things like that. And I worked there for about 11 months, and the owner and I didn't really see eye to eye on things. And I thought one of us had to leave, and I figured since it was his company, I should probably be the one to bow out. And so I went from there to working with this friend of mine who I had gone to camp with, and he was working for a company that was just getting involved in, as I said, the novelty entertainment area. And we worked for a couple guys who were great to work for, showed me the ropes and taught me a lot about business. And they had a falling out and ended up dissolving the company. And my friend and I ended up with the business. Uh, he didn't really want to do this. He likes really big events. And that's what he's gone on to do. I mean, he now works for a company that designs major attractions for theme parks like Disney and other. I mean, so he loves the really big projects. And I kind of like the niche that I found. So I went off on my own a little bit. And at the same time, I went to work for a company that provided entertainment for weddings.
Hmm.
And I lasted there about 2 years, didn't love that either. It's never the brides. I didn't have any bridezillas. I had mamazillas who were the mothers of the brides that were a
Hmm.
lot more intense and a lot more difficult to deal with than the brides themselves. So I went to work for another company that did mostly providing caricature artists for events and worked there for a while. And the owner of that company managed to bankrupt his company. And
Shoot.
one of the other guys and I we started what is now Fun Enterprises. And one of the guys I had worked with previously was a third partner, and that ended up not working out very well. So he left after about a year, and it's been the two of us ever since.
So you didn't really plan on all this, it sounds like, because you were bouncing from thing to thing to thing. Why the jump from that to like your own company?
Well, once the guy bankrupted his company, I didn't have a job. So
So you kind of had to, it sounds like.
it was either start our own company or go find somebody else to work for. And by then I'd worked for enough people to realize that it wasn't my favorite thing to do, and that I was convinced we could do it and we could do it better. And so, no, always refer to myself as a reluctant entrepreneur. It wasn't, you talk to people who, started lemonade stands at the age of, 8. And by the time they were in high school, they were starting a lawn care business. And then in college, they started this business. And that was not me. I was very content to work for people until it started not working out. And then it was kind of, maybe we should try this on our own. I've said to people over the years that I never wanted to be responsible for somebody else's earning potential based on how well or how poorly I did my job. And
Right.
that's the situation I'm in today, which is if I don't do the sales and I don't get what people need, they're going to have trouble paying their rent, their mortgage, their car insurance, all that stuff.
Exactly. So you had two partners and then one of them left. Do you have tips for that? Because you didn't plan on like a partner leaving you. And that probably changed the whole like culture of like your company, right?
Well, the him leaving was our choice.
So
Um,
you had him leave. Okay, I got you.
yeah. So what ended up happening was that there were some things that when we incorporated Fun Enterprises, he never told us. Like he was going through a divorce and there were other issues on the table, and it just wasn't a great fit, and he wasn't really contributing a lot to the company, but we were paying him a lot.
I see.
And when I went back to look at the articles of incorporation, we had kind of trusted him and realized that he wound up with 90% of the stock.
Wow.
And so I went to several attorneys who said, "You're stuck with this arrangement. There's nothing you can do." And I took the paperwork home, and night after night, I looked at it, and I finally figured out a way to get him out. And the way that we did it was that he had more power as a stockholder, but the three of us had equal shares as board of directors members. So what I did was we held a meeting that we gave him appropriate notice for the whole 9 yards, and he ended up not coming to the meeting and said to me, "Whatever you guys do, I can undo." Well, the one thing he didn't count on was that we voted ourselves directors' bonuses, which had they been paid out would have bankrupted the company. So he realized when we sent him the notes of the meeting, what we had done, realized that he couldn't undo it, even as the majority shareholder, and said, "Well, what do you want?" And I said, "I want you out." And we went back and forth and finally settled on a number, and we paid him out, and that was the end of it.
Dang. Lesson learned though, because now you have the same partner for the last, you said like 35 years, right?
Yep.
Do you have tips for that? Because that's not very common for a company to have the same founding members. Most of them either leave at some point, but they don't stay at the same company for that long, usually, right?
I think that, partnership is like a marriage. And There are times when we don't get along. There are times when we butt heads, but he has a set of skills that I don't have, and I have a set of skills that he doesn't have. And so over time, we've just made it work. He does not like to sell. He does not like to be in the limelight. He doesn't want to be the face of the company. Those are things that I have no problem with, but he is an outstanding CFO. And he makes sure that, I mean, in our early years, when we didn't have two nickels to rub together, as my mother would say, he kept us afloat. And, again, you give me a pile of money and it'll be gone in a week. With him, he was very, very cautious on the way that we spent money. So he would if we couldn't afford it, we didn't buy it. So we had no credit card debt. We had no debt whatsoever. And it wasn't until later years that we actually got credit cards, bought stuff, and wound up with some debt. But he's always managed the money well. So we had a system that worked. We also have in our office the newest staff member. Well, we hired somebody last August, but before that, the newest staff member's been there 10 years, and we have people that have been there over 30 years.
Wow.
So it's very much like a family. And as somebody in our office says, every family is dysfunction, and this one is no different. We have our own dysfunction, but we have dysfunction that we manage to deal with. I think that, we've we're comfortable working with one another. We're comfortable with what areas we can, each handle, and what, we stay in our lanes basically. I've gotten much better over the years in terms of reading spreadsheets and P&L statements. None of that stuff was really in my wheelhouse when we started. So we've developed different skills that help the business stay afloat. So,
No worries. But you're the main sales guy, it sounds like your main role was like sales and marketing for this company.
yep,
Do you
it
have any
is.
tips for that? Because some people, they try the whole sales, but they can't really get into it. What's helped you personally to make the sales grow for your company?
Um, I'm a huge believer over the years that sales you either really like it or you don't. And there are people that are going to be good at it, but unless they love it, they'll never be great at it. Uh, I read when I first started, it was just again by the seat of my pants. It was trying to figure this out. When I first got into the business, I thought, okay, I was a college programmer, so I understand what students on college campuses want, and I'll be able to provide that. And I'm honest and I work hard. And I thought, well, that's all you really need. And I learned over time that is absolutely not correct. That I would look at some of my competitors and ask, why would people book with them? They're not nice. They're kind of smarmy people. But, again, everybody reacts to people differently. And they had people that they really liked and liked to work with. Um, so I started probably about 20 years ago. I started looking into sales classes and reading sales books and um, trying to better understand what it was that we did. And I got frustrated one day, and I don't like to lose. I'm a very competitive human being, and I got tired of losing to my competition. I got tired of people, getting the sale before I did. And so I, over time, just became, I don't want to say aggressive, but probably a little bit more aggressive and more attentive to my clients. Uh, and over time, I've developed things that with our clients um, that I do that nobody else does. And so that's very helpful. Um, so that's kind of how I did it. Um, some of the sales training classes that I took were phenomenal. Uh, Working with, there was a guy named Chet Holmes, and I was driving to work one day, and it said, "Hey, would you like to double your sales in 12 months?" And I'm like, "Well, of course I would." And um, you know, you sign up for this free webinar, so I signed up for it. And of course, the last 15 minutes of the presentation are nothing more than a sales pitch.
Right.
And I bought the class, and I sat down and I started listening to it, and a lot of what he said made so much sense. And, then I found this woman, Jill Conrath, she no longer does her sales training, but she had just some incredible ideas on you know, how to work with clients and how to get some of those events that you really want or those clients that you really want. So you know, if I had a suggestion for people, first of all, if what you're looking for is a good salary, you're probably not a great salesperson. Really good salespeople want to work off commission because they know that commission, your earning potential is endless. If you're really good at it and you bring in, you know, let's say you can bring in $3 million to a company and you get 15% of that, you're making a nice chunk of change at 450 grand. Uh,
Right.
but somebody else who says, well, I want to make $100,000 and I want that guaranteed, they're probably not the right person for sales. I probably look at sales differently in that I believe that in every industry, you're selling something that people need. So instead of looking at it as pressuring people to buy something they don't want, I mean, yes, if you're selling, I've gone on a bunch of timeshare tours, and those guys are brutal, and they're not going to, they're like a bear trap on your leg. Once you get your foot in there, it's going to be virtually impossible to get out, and they make it very difficult. But most of the things people buy, they buy because they need it. And I'm a firm believer in that people buy for three reasons. They buy for need, price, or relationship. We fall as a company very squarely in that last category. Is I don't want customers, I want clients. And there's a huge difference between the two. A client is very transactional. When you're driving down the street and you're thirsty and pop into a 7-Eleven and you grab your Slurpee and you get back in your car, you're a customer. You're just buying it, and clients are under your care and protection. So there's somebody that you want to form a long-term relationship with. And I think that is different because then price becomes a little bit less important. What they're looking for is they're looking for service, and service is important. And that's kind of where we thrive. And I became probably the first 10 years I did this, I was very uncomfortable with the title salesperson. And then I realized, well, that is what I do. Um,
Hmm.
and I got much more comfortable with it. And I always say to people, the part of my job that I have to do is the sales piece. The part that I like to do is when somebody comes to me and says, I have an idea for an event and they want to partner with me and they want to create this fabulous event for themselves. That's the area that I really love. And those are the fun things when you can start with a blank slate and create this event that people really enjoy.
So from what I'm hearing from you is you focus on the people first, like their needs for sales. But I'm curious on like your tips or tricks, because obviously you need to have some sort of either offer or twist or something where you want to get them like enticed by like your offer for like customers. Do you have tips for that personally for different companies or sales reps?
I think everybody's industry is a little bit different. We do I always think the personal connections are great, and that's getting much harder in 2026 than it was when I
Yes.
started in the mid '80s, where you didn't have the internet and you didn't have the access to email. And the first time I ever booked an event that the person refused to talk to me on the phone was completely threw me for a loop. And I was like, I don't really want to do it this way. I want to talk to you. I want to have a conversation. Um, the sales stuff that I know is pretty typical that you're going to find from most sales quote unquote gurus, which is you always need to find their pain point. And for a lot of our clients, their pain point is one of two or three things. One is it's money, it's financial. That was not an issue probably 10 years ago, but now it is a huge issue. So price is important, and charging a fair price. We're never going to be the cheapest, we're never going to be the most expensive, but I feel like we offer value for what we provide. The second is making sure that those relationships are solid. Find out, there's an old saying, God gave you two ears, one mouth, use them proportionally. I'm a huge believer in that, if you assume you know what people want, you're making a mistake. And it's one of the things that Chet Holmes puts very early in the sales training course that I took, which is if you want to know what your customers or clients want, you have to ask them. And I get so many emails nowadays from people that are doing sales that it is full of jargon, and it's not asking me what I need. It's just throwing up a bunch of terms that are for them important, but maybe not important for me. So ask your clients what they want. Speak in plain language. I think that one of the quickest ways to increase your business is underpromise and overdeliver. So, tell somebody this is, here's what you can expect, but if you can provide a little bit more, you get customers or clients for life. They're people they'll come back to you. Uh, One of the things in my business that's really common, which is very frustrating, is I don't care what business you're in, everybody makes mistakes. And if you make a mistake, couple things. One is own it, but two is fix it right then and there. So we've had issues where an artist showed up late. I mean, I had an issue a couple weeks ago where a guy blew a tire. It's not his fault.
Mm.
He had left himself plenty of time, tire blew. Well, we don't say to the client, "Oh, the next time you book us, I'm going to give you a discount. I give you a really good deal." We go back to the client, we say, "Well, what do we need to do to make it right for this event?" And we understand that if somebody completely misses an event, there's not much we can do. You can't go
Right.
back and relive that event. But instead of saying to them, we give them options. Do you want us to, if you've already cut the check, do you want us to write you a refund check? If you haven't cut the check, do you want to take some money off? Or if you want, we'll extend you a credit that you can use in the next 12 months.
Hmm.
So the decision is theirs. The decision is not mine as to how to fix my screw up. We let them determine how they're going to do that. And I think that is also very valuable to people is understanding that they're in charge and that what you're going to do is you're going to try and do everything in your power to make them whole immediately, not book me again in 6 months and I'll take care of you. Because that's
Which
what
makes sense. Because most people, they try and wait the few months and then fix the problem down the road. I'm curious too for you for marketing, because it's probably changed quite a bit since the 90s, because you had maybe flyers back then, but now you've got social media, the internet. How have things changed for you, like marketing side for your company?
it's not even it's
Probably night and
so
day, right?
different from what it was
I
before.
imagine.
Again, everything was either direct mail via the phone. Those were the two ways you got to clients. There was no, back in the when we first started, there were no, there wasn't the internet. A fax was a big deal, and we used to have clients all the time that would say, "Well, I can't accept a fax." So you'd be FedExing documents to a client overnight to make sure they got it. Um, People shop very differently now, especially in my market, which is a lot of my clients are 18 to 30 years old because most of my client base are colleges and universities. So a lot of them are people that they don't they use their phone to text. They don't use their phone to talk. They use their phone to text or to scroll social media. So again, we have to have social media channels. We have to, put stuff out on Instagram, and we do some on TikTok, and we do, some on Facebook because some of our clients are older and Facebook is still where they go. Um,
Right.
so we do
But
a lot more emailing and a
hmm,
lot less snail mailing.
interesting. But you probably pay someone else to do like the TikTok and stuff for you, I imagine, right?
Somebody in our organization does it. It's not me. I am not social media savvy. I
Which makes
understand it
sense.
enough to get in trouble. Um, we've switched. So in 2020, in March of 2020, I started to write a blog every single week. and it was, it probably served some mental health, you know, there was probably some mental health benefit to me doing it. And it gave me the opportunity to reach out to our clients. And a lot of our clients followed that blog every week because it was talking about things that were going on at the company with me personally, what was going on in the world. And over time, that blog has continued. Uh, every marketing person we've ever looked at or ever talked to says, "Oh, you got to change your blog. It's got to be much more about the company." And I'm like, "No, I'm not changing it. The blog for us is a way for people to let us know that we're human beings, and it's a good way, it's a good insight into what we do." So over time, that blog has now shifted to it's a video that I do every week. And uh, I still enjoy writing, and again, I'm old fashioned. The stuff that I write, I don't just put in a couple prompts to Chat GPT and have it spit out an article. About the only thing I use AI for a lot is I'll have it edit my stuff, and then I'll have somebody human who will also edit it. So the marketing piece has changed so dramatically. We also do very different things now than we used to. Uh, and this started years ago. I used to attend a conference for this organization called the National Association for Campus Activities, which we're still members of. And friends of mine were on the stage crew because part of what we did was there was an opportunity for acts to get on stage so people could watch them. Well, the stage crew used to have to work really long hours, and I would bring them banana bread because it's one of the few things that I don't mind baking. And I don't know how, but over time, more and more people found out about the bread. So over the summers, I've done bread tours where I bake, 30 loaves of banana bread, and I swing by clients' offices and I drop them off.
Wow.
Um, I
Wow.
do roundtables now with my clients where I bring in a bunch of clients. We talk about what's going on in the industry because I realized there was a need for that. A lot of these people don't get time with their peers and they don't get the opportunity to talk about what's going on in their campus. We did one in December, and so many people were shocked that the experiences and the things that they were struggling with on their campus, almost everybody else in the room was also struggling with. And we're talking about a pretty diverse group that was from community colleges, traditional 4-year, residential, non-residential, religiously affiliated, non-religiously affiliated. So there was a really good mix, and they all found that everyone was struggling with the same thing. So things like that, we don't use them as an overt marketing tool, but it
Right.
it it is something that keeps our name in front of people. Um, and at something like that, we do no marketing. I don't hand out promotional material. Uh, you ask what's changed. We used to, for years, we would make these really nice full color glossy brochures. We don't do that anymore because our products change so frequently that you have to continually update them. They're expensive and most people throw them out. And some people, when they see a printed flyer, they get offended. Like, why are you killing a tree? Just put it online.
Exactly. But you go to the schools like directly, you traveled all these different places, which I think is pretty cool because you're older, so you get all like your people, like the demographic, the culture, what they're trying to go through. I'm curious too how you went through COVID because obviously your company is very like entertainment focused, and at that time it was all closed down. Did you guys have to like pivot in some way for COVID?
We did. We were shut down, or we were pretty much completely shut down for about 3 weeks. And then a lot of our clients started contacting us saying, we got to do something, whether it's for a corporation or a college. We need to keep our people connected to whatever the institution or organization was. What can you do? So we started doing virtual caricature dates and virtual psychic fairs and virtual paint parties and virtual game shows. We found a wide range of ways to keep people engaged. We didn't, a number of our competitors started doing drop ship stuff where And the school would send them a list of addresses, and they would package stuff up in their warehouse and ship it to the students. We never really got into that too much. Part of it was that I didn't like the way it looked and I didn't like the way it felt. For me, the stuff that we do that's important is we bring people together. And so, just shipping a bunch of coloring books to somebody's house, it might have filled a need for somebody, but it wasn't a need that we wanted to fill. Uh,
Right.
that was we did a lot more virtual programming. I still have a half dozen playlists in my computer that I use during virtual character dates and virtual psychic dates. I found that the virtual psychic dates were awesome. One of the things about doing psychics on college campuses is that as soon as the psychics are there, a line forms.
Hmm.
And so it if they can read about 8 people an hour, so if 30 people get in line for a reader for a 3-hour event, anybody coming 15 minutes after that thing started is not gonna get read.
Right.
What I love about the virtual psychics is people could schedule, the we would send a link and it had all the time slots and however many readers there were, and so if you were in class until 6:30 and the event went until 7, you could schedule yourself a 6:37 time slot or whatever it was and still get read. And you could plan that out 4 or 5 days ahead of time. So regardless of somebody's schedule, they could almost always find a time to get in, which wasn't happening at live readings. We had
Right.
bunch of our clients say, even when COVID passes, we're gonna still do virtual programs. And that lasted about 37 seconds. And and then, the directive from a lot of administrators was no more virtual programming. It's gotta be live. We want people on campus, we want people congregating. You have to do the live programming. And so on very rare occasions, we still will do a virtual paint party, a virtual trivia night, a virtual psychic fair, but they're few and far between.
Could you guys do both options?
We did. We had stuff where we had a psychic on campus and then a psychic virtually. And that was fun too. So it was a different way to program.
It's probably tough though, because with psychic, that's one by one, but for like a party or some like event, you can't have like a singer through Zoom as easily. I mean, I guess you could, but you'd have like 30 cameras for this one like event. I'm curious how you guys went through that because your main event was like singers too, right? So how did you guys do that through Zoom?
We don't do a lot of music. We stick
Okay.
much we work with speakers and we work with a lot of the novelty programs.
Which that would work through Zoom then, right? That's a pretty easy
Yep.
switch there.
But we were part of a couple concerts, virtual concerts, which were really cool. We had one school that had they hired a musician, and we were drawing caricatures while it was going on. And so people would sit in front of the artist, and you could hear the music in the background, and it was all done virtually, and it was really people got very clever during COVID
Hmm.
and
I,
very creative.
well, you probably have to just like survive in that time. I'm curious if you were to start over right now, but all that like your current knowledge, all of that, and you start over and you're now 20, what would you do?
I'd open a McDonald's.
Really? Why?
I mean, I don't know if I would get involved in entertainment. It's hard to think back about what it was like when I was 20 because I'm not 20 anymore, and I know how hard this business is and how hard it has become. Um, if I was going to start over again, I don't know how much I would do differently. Um, I would, I'm very lucky because when we first started, we were an anomaly. You had people that booked shows and you had service providers, but it was very rare that one organization did both. And that was exactly what we did. We would book, say, our old fashioned photos, and somebody that, I could be the person that booked it, but I also could be the person that showed up and did the job. So I have a lot of time on college campuses and with our clients. Um, some of the stuff we've done and had the experience to do, we've traveled. We used to do a lot more work all over the country. So I got to travel and see things that I would not have normally seen. Even in the Boston area, we've gotten to do some really cool events where, July 4th of 2000, we did an event at the top of the Prudential building.
Wow.
So we got to see the fireworks display, and it was pretty much at eye level, which was really, I mean, that's kind of
Probably
fascinating.
something, yeah, probably something there for
Um,
sure.
if I had it all to do over again, what would I do differently? Um, I I would take some of the lessons that I learned, especially from a business coach, and I would put those into play much earlier. When I was much younger and started this business, I was a real arrogant, very strong-headed, you know, moron, and I probably didn't treat people as well as I should have. And one of the things, so we hired a business coach probably 15 to 18 years ago, and he had a couple conditions for agreeing to work with us. And one of them was he had to have full access to our staff, unfettered. I said, no problem. He wanted to survey our staff. And I said, go right ahead. I really believed that I knew what our staff was going to come back with when the survey went out. And I could not have been more wrong. A couple of the questions he asked one question and said, is everybody at the company treated equally? And 80% of the staff said no. But then later on, he asked, is everybody at the company treated fairly? And 80% of the staff said yes. So people acknowledge the fact that not everyone's going to get treated the same way, but that's okay because people probably have a different level of commitment. Uh, he said, one of the things that really kind of shook me was, do you know when you're doing a good job? And 80% said, not really. But do you know when you've screwed up? 80% said, oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
his advice to me, and I have written this and I've talked about it before, was he said, put away the 2x4. He said, you're real good at letting people know when there's an issue, but you're not so good at letting people know when they've done a good job. And it really got me to refocus and change the way that I do things. And one of the things that I used to do all the time was if something went wrong, it was really important to me to assign blame. And as time's gone on, I realized, well, that's really stupid. That's just a waste of time. And now I look at it and I identify, is this systematic or is it a one off? So if it's a one off, you kind of, I'm very lucky because the staff that we have, they know when they screw up. I don't have to tell them. And one of the things I realized after working with this business coach was that my harping on what they did wrong was not beneficial, was not helpful. And so they knew that they screwed up. I didn't have to tell them that. And then if it's systemic, you change it. You go back and you look and you say, okay, this is a problem. This is an organizational problem. We need to change it. Um,
Right.
so that if I was going to start all over again, I would probably start at that point. I apologize a lot more now than I ever used to. And it's not a shallow apology. It is, I feel badly. And if I screw up, I want people to understand that I screwed up. I will take accountability for it. I will take responsibility for it. And I will try and do better in the future. And I will say to people when I make mistakes, I've said this for years, I probably make more mistakes at our organization than anybody else. And not probably, I definitely make more mistakes. And I'm very lucky because the people that I work with extend me a lot of grace. And so, I try and fix those problems. Our office manager, Kim, who's the person that types all the contracts, I probably get 2 emails from her a week of like, um, kind of screwed something up here. This doesn't look right. Or, did you mean to charge them for this? Or you mentioned this in the email to me, but it's not on the contract, or you didn't mention this in the email, but it's on the contract. So I'm very lucky that I have people that are watching my back. Um, and I think that there is no substitute for grace and kindness. There's no substitute uh, for really trying to make sure that you're giving people your best and they in return give you their best.
Right. Well, it's clearly working for you because you have a very long-term team right now that's been there for decades, you were saying. So your culture, your coaching is definitely working for the company, it sounds like.
I hope so. I
That's
think
always the goal, right?
that is always the goal. And I think one of the things that's a testament to that is the number of family members that we have working there. So, we have a lot of people that have invited cousins and aunts and uncles and kids and, nephews and nieces to work there. And so we have somebody that's leaving at the end of next week. And we were on a meeting with them the other day. And, they'll continue to work jobs for us. They won't work full time anymore.
Mhm.
And somebody in the office said, well, this place is like the mafia. You never really get completely out. And I think there's some truth to that where we have people that, their roles may change, but they rarely leave completely.
Which is, I think, a good sign for a company. Well, you have been fantastic. I'm curious for like your last thoughts or takeaways, what that would be to the audience.
I think that I read an article not that long ago, and I've since gone back to read it a few times. It was by Mark Cuban, and Mark Cuban, it was the worst piece of advice he's ever received, and the worst piece of advice you could ever give to somebody. And what he said was, the worst piece of advice you can give or receive is follow your passion. And when I first read that, I'm like, what is he talking about? I've been telling people that for years. Follow your passion. And when I looked at it and I started to think about it, what he says, don't follow your passion, follow what you're willing to work at. And when I started to really think about that, I realized he's right. Is I love to play golf. I suck at it. I've never gotten any better. I've been playing for years, but I don't work at it. I'm not willing to put the time in to go to the driving range, to go hit, 3 hours of balls at the end of a work day. But what I what I am willing to put time and effort into, I get really pretty good at a lot of it. I love taking pictures. So I've taken photography classes and I'll grab my camera and I'll just wander around for a day or two and I'll shoot whatever I feel like. And I'll go back and I'll edit the pictures and I'll look at them. I love to cook, but I'm also willing to put time into that. So if I had one piece of advice to give somebody, if you want to start a business and you want to get good at it, work on something that you are willing to put the time and effort into. It may not necessarily be your passion, but hopefully it will become your passion. I have been very lucky. I have spent almost 40 years in a field that I really like. I'm very lucky in that I see people on some of the best days of their lives. I see people on signature weddings. We have had the opportunity to there was a family that we used to see. The dad was involved in the food industry, and we used to attend a food trade show, and he was there. And usually a week or two after that, we would see him at one of the colleges because he had like 5 kids.
Mm.
And invariably, we would run into them again at a family weekend. And we took pictures of those kids probably for 8 to 10 years,
Wow.
and they would talk about the fact that these photos were on their walls at home and they got to see their kids grow up through our pictures. Um, that is, you know, people say to me, "Oh, you must have a really fun job." And I say to people all the time, "I have a job like every other job. I have days that are really good and days that are not so good." The difference between my job and most people's job is if I'm having a lousy day, I look at my watch and I go, "You know what? I got 4 hours of this and then I never have to deal with these people again." Um, but but it's given me the opportunity. I have traveled to a ton of different cities and states. some of which I never would have been to. I've now gone to 48 states in the United States.
Dang.
So I've seen a lot of the country. Um, I've worked events that were just really phenomenal. I've worked in places and seen cities that, that people will never get to. Uh, I read somewhere like the average American goes to about 15 states in their life. Well, I've done more than 3 times that, and I've seen, this country is amazing. I've worked in spaces that I never thought I would work in. We did an event that was backstage at the Opera House in Boston, and it was just a gorgeous facility, and to be standing backstage was just a blast,
I
and
imagine.
it was a lot of fun. Um, I've worked for, people say, "Have you ever worked with famous people?" Yes, I have. Some of them are great to work with, some of them are lousy. We do a lot of stuff with athletes, and I've worked with athletes that, I would work with them, every day and twice on Sunday because they were so nice to work with. And I've worked with others that I'm like,
Mm,
well, I hope I never run into that person again. Uh,
right.
and so we've gotten to do some really cool stuff. Um, I would say to people, if I had a last piece of advice, it is, savor every day that you have because you never know when that journey is going to come to an end. My father-in-law worked at the Aetna for years and walked in one day and was let go. And it was not performance based. He's getting up there in years. He wasn't that old, but he was at that point that keeping him would have meant the pension was going to go through the roof for him. So it was easier just to dump him and hire somebody half his age. And that's what they did. And he loved what he did, and he was devastated when he lost his job. He ended up doing fine. He ended up becoming an independent broker and did very well financially, enjoyed his life, got to travel. But you never know. I mean, we've been at companies on their very last day of existence. And it's a very strange, we were at one company doing their holiday party, and right before the holiday party starts, they bring everybody into the cafeteria and say, well, we're going to be shutting down operation within the next month. Most people had no idea.
Goodness.
So, savor what you have. If you love what you do, celebrate it. Uh, and don't be afraid to really savor those good times and enjoy the people that you work with. And if you don't love your job, get out. There's a woman that I met years ago, and one of the things that she said, whenever I have 3 bad days in a row at a job, I leave. And I'm like, that's really healthy. Could I do that? Probably not, but it's very rare that I've had 3 bad days in a row. Um, but for her mental health and for her psyche, you know, life is too short to do a job you hate.
Exactly. If people want to find you online, where can they go to?
The easiest way is go to our website. It's www.funement.com. The name of the company is Fun Enterprises. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page. So that's where they can find me.
There you go. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, stay hungry.